But having you guys in our corner is something that is extremely valuable for us, right? And I think having clients understand where we're getting our information from and how we're doing it, and really just how and why we're relying on you guys at Hotspotting, is key, because it's just giving them the confidence that we're not just throwing darts on a dartboard trying to randomly just try and find areas. There actually is like a real solid methodology behind what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So hotspotting, the key word hotspotting, a lot of people think about hotspotting as a flash in the pan hit of growth, like a quick injection of growth, and we jump from a $400,000 median up to 800,000 very quickly. It doesn't quite work like that. So hotspotting is we identify locations around Australia by taking big data and creating insights from that data. Anybody can go and buy a CoreLogic report and find out where the medians have changed and all those types of things. But to create insights is another thing. So we've got a team of analysts that are studying every single suburb in Australia every quarter. And then we pull together that data in the way of insights in the form of reports, which we share with consumers and obviously businesses like yourself. Now, what we're looking for, we have a formula called the empirical formula, which empirical by definition is the evidence or study that relies on practical experience rather than theories. So we've developed this formula over the years. Empirical, EMPIRICAL, is economy. So we need to look for a really strong and diverse economy. When people say the Australian property market, there's thousands of property markets within Australia. And we're a big believer that the markets are driven by the local economy. So we start with economy, and we're looking for a really strong and diverse economy. We love, industries like health, industries like education. These are the types of industries that are strong employers, and whether or not we've got recessions, whether we've got COVID outbreaks, they're the type of industry that is still there and constantly strong. The next one is M for market size. So we're not looking at locations that have got, 10 sales a year and things like that. We need a minimum market size per suburb. We would say at bare minimum need to be 50 per year. Then we're looking at population growth. All right. We want to see strong population growth, because with populations growing, there's a reason it's growing. It's growing because people want to live there. Right. And with, further population growth coming into an area, that puts demand on the property market, which is putting an emphasis on property prices to go up. Okay. Furthermore, we're big on infrastructures. That's the I. So we want to see good existing infrastructure. We're not looking at greenfield areas that have got, a train station that one day will be opened up and one day they're going to open a hospital. We want good existing infrastructure that if somebody was to live there today, they can access. But we also want to see strong evidence of future infrastructure coming into the area as well. And we're also mindful that when we think about infrastructure, it's not, people are often seeing big projects in renewable energy and things like that, where, they come into the town and they set up and then they go. That's not long-term, infrastructure and job creation that we're looking for. So we want things like railway lines, new hospitals, that type of infrastructure that will, serve that local population for a long time. The R in empirical stands for the rental market. We're looking for areas with low vacancy, which is pretty easy to do around Australia these days. But the reason that we look at that and we forget about today's market, in any market, we need locations that have got low vacancy rates, well under 3%, because if we have low vacancy, that means there's strong demand and it's putting upward pressure on rents. So I might start with a 5% yield or a 6% yield today, but within 2 years, if I'm bought in the right area, that can quickly turn into an 8%, 9% yield, right? And I've got plenty of examples of where that's happened, right? And especially in the last few years. The I in empirical is increasing employment opportunities. So where are the jobs coming from, right? And it can't just be, one industry again. It's got to be diverse, but we want to see this population growth are coming here for jobs, aren't they? And, Adelaide's been a great example of that over the last few years. Some of the fastest interstate migration they've seen in 30 years, driven by job creation. So these are the types of things we're looking for. The C is capital growth, okay? There's obviously a big talk about cash flow when yields drop away with higher interest rates. But ultimately, if you were to get an extra $200 per week in your pocket, I don't know about you, but that's not life-changing to me. but 200 grand worth of uplift in capital growth in 12 months, that is life-changing for a lot of people. So we don't want capital growth that is only long-term. We're looking for places that the data is telling us low vacancy rates putting upward pressure on rents. Capital growth is happening as well, and sales volumes, which is where our price predictor index comes in. And I'll talk about that at a later date as well. But we want to see an increase in sales volumes, because sales volumes show demand increasing. And what tends to follow in a rising market of sales volumes is capital growth that will follow that. Like on the opposite end, when we see sales volumes declining, that's where we start to see softening of prices. And, there's not a lot of economists around the country that actually take note of sales volumes. And, we've been doing this, or Terry at least has been doing this, since 2012. So we do that on every suburb in Australia every quarter. And then the last two, affordability, we tend to stay under the 650 bracket when we're looking at investment opportunities for people, because at the 650 and above is where rental yield starts to drop away, especially in higher interest rates that we're seeing at the moment. People don't really, they can't really afford, especially if they've got a debt on their own home, to be tipping into their savings, or to be tapping into their money out of pocket for mortgages on a second and third investment property. So we're trying to find properties that are in that affordability bracket, that are paying their own way, or putting a little bit of money in their pocket from day one. And the last part, which everybody wants, the L, is for low risk. So avoiding areas that are propped up by tourism and mining, and areas that are, a one-trick pony. So it's a long-winded explanation, but that's what our empirical formula is, and that drives a lot of our decision making.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, sweet. And obviously, because but there's obviously different research analysts out there, but I haven't seen anyone really do it as well as what you guys are doing now, which is very handy for us, because it makes it a perfect fit for the solutions. So when it comes to you guys, because obviously Terry's been doing this for a number of years, and I've been watching a lot of what Terry's been doing since basically 2012, 2013, 2014. I guess one of the questions I have got, and this is something, in line with really the way that technology is moving, right? Because obviously AI, a couple of years ago was one of those fantasy things, right? Whereas nowadays it's almost the norm. In 5 years' time, I can imagine that we're going to be quite, heavily relying on future technologies, AI, a lot of, and there is a question about, employment disruption and displacement, all this sort of stuff. But where do you think, technology, as we're heading towards the future, using some form of technology to help really improve the efficiency of how we're getting this data, and how we're kind of finding different areas and things like that? I mean, from your guys' perspective, because really for me, again, it's a lot of guesswork, right? But for you guys, where you think that we're heading, what can you guys see?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Corey. Well, firstly, I'll start with real estate data is notoriously bad. And the reason I say that, it is, right? Yeah. It's notoriously bad. You can go to, and I probably shouldn't name all of these companies, but, you can go to one provider and, looking at the same quarter, and then go to another provider, and, the results are just polar opposites. Yeah. And look, whilst, that's not necessarily their individual fault, they have different ways of extracting that data. Some of them are relying very heavily on getting results from the valuer general. Other ones, like personally, and I can talk to this one, at Hotspotting, we use PropTrack. PropTrack is owned by realestate.com, the largest real estate portal in Australia, almost double the size of its nearest competitor in domain. The reason we've decided to partner with PropTrack for our data is because there isn't too many listings in Australia that don't go on PropTrack. Now, what that means is we've got the power of realestate.com's data that we're relying on. We can get live feeds to our members portal on that data. So it means that, let's say that a property transacts over the weekend, and in most cases, most providers are waiting for 3 months before they can get the sales advice, because they're waiting for the valuer general to tell them that. Even if the vendor's agent doesn't actually mark the price on the front end of the portal, they just say contact agent or sold. In the back end, it actually does have what it's sold for. So we get access to live data. So that's an important part. Now, coming back to what you're talking about in the way of how AI is going to affect data, and certainly in the real estate industry, how it's going to affect us in the future. I think somebody said many years ago, the internet will change everything it touches, and it touches almost everything. And I think we're getting to that point with AI very quickly as well, for good and for bad. Like the trends that I'm seeing in AI at the moment, range from home automation, which can be great for saving money as a homeowner or in a tenant, in the way of sensor lights and all those types of things. That's the basic stuff. Then it can go through to predictive methodology on maintenance items, which again, as an owner, that can work in your favor. Then we can go on to working as an agent. How do I get the best price for my vendor? I'm going to start using some technology that will, stage the house virtually. I mean, these days, especially if you're buying interstate, it can be really risky because you see these beautiful photos online and it's not real. It's AI, injecting in a beautiful new look to the house. And, that's why you do need boots on the ground when you're buying, and getting virtual video walkthroughs and things like that, because AI, it's scary what they can do now. Some of these images look completely lifelike.
Yeah.
The last part on the AI that I'll touch on is the, I suppose, predictive methodology of market analysts. So identifying, using AI to say, this is where you should buy and this is what you should buy. And I think this is where the technology is fantastic if you use it in the right way to cut out a lot of man hours. It can really get rid of outliers and tell you, I don't want to see any suburbs that have, sales volumes below 100, right? I could use AI to really tell me this is where I should be looking, and this is all the stuff that you shouldn't bother with. But I don't want to rely on it much further than that at this point. And the reason being is because, the AI's data, its insights are only as good as the data it consumes. And let's use as an example population and demographics of that. If it's relying on data from the last census, that's outdated by the time it even gets to you. If we're relying on a lot of decision makings like a lot of data like that, it's really missing what a human can tell you by walking through that location. And I don't just mean the house. I mean walking through a suburb. Nothing, AI will never be able to do that for you. Maybe it does with a street view and things like that, but a gut feel, I don't know that we're going to be close to being able to take. I certainly wouldn't be using AI to tell me what street to buy and what neighborhood. I wouldn't be that far advanced with it now.
Yeah, and look, I completely agree. But the other thing it doesn't take into consideration yet as well is the client circumstance, because that's, and I see this quite often, right? It's, oftentimes, and I'm sure you guys have this too, people come to you and say, hey, what sort of property should I buy and where should I buy it?
Yeah.
Well, that's the most irrelevant question you can ask. It depends on your situation. It depends on, really what kind of strategy, what kind of advice, because the strategy dictates the kind of property and where.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I don't, look, the sky's the limit, right? And with the current way that AI is looking, it's almost like right now this is what would you call it? The blackboard and chalk versus the iPad, which is going to be in 5 years' time. Which we might get there, but no, I completely agree, because it's really it is disruptive in one sense, and I think that it will help a lot in terms of like manpower, because things like sales.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sales is a bit of a it's a human, emotional, interactive kind of job.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as people love buying things and they love, online shopping and spending lots of money, it can certainly help with that. But relying on it for predictions and areas, I think that's
Yeah. I mean, real estate's a very expensive mistake when you get it wrong.
Yeah.
So and look, I can tell you I haven't stepped foot in. I think there's one investment property I own that I've stepped foot in when it was a new build that is about to settle. I've walked through that property, but every other one I haven't. And for a lot of people, that's a really daunting exercise. I think it's become a lot more accepted now that I can't tell you much about a property by walking through it in comparison to what a licensed building inspector could. So I don't necessarily need to walk through every single investment property. I don't need to do that on every listing that I'm going to put an offer on, because there are ways that I can find out whether or not I should be progressing with that deal other than me personally walking through it. However, when it comes to the technology that is out there now, as you mentioned, it's a way to help us with man hours. I don't necessarily need to go trawling through all of this data. If AI can tell me where I should be looking, that's how I think it will benefit a lot of people into the future in our business. But it's not going to be something we can heavily rely on to just say this is where we should be buying, and that's the exact property.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really designed to support, not replace, right?
That's
now,
exactly right.
which
You
I
put it
think
perfectly.
yeah, it's really good point. Now, one of the, I guess, questions I do have for you, Tim, and this is something, when we think about the future in terms of where we're going. And look, being the fact that my boots are on the ground, I mean, I was in Brisbane on, Monday looking at some sites. I'm from Perth and live in Perth.
Yeah.
And, I can see two sides of the spectrum here. In one side, for property investors right now, everyone's loving it. Everyone's making lots of money. Rents are increasing, values are increasing across the board. The current supply and demand, is very much in favor of people who are in the market. On the other side of the coin, socially, it doesn't seem like we're heading in a very good direction, right? When we've got 624,000 people have entered the country in the last 12 months, and we're building less than 100,000 homes per year. When we see the current levels of immigration, when we see the current levels of even what banks are doing, using interest rates as the only mechanic to try and combat inflation, it's like they're going into brain surgery with a frigging hammer. It's for me, it's again, I can see two sides of the coin here. And I guess really looking on the back of 2023, the property market's done considerably well, especially on the back of the likes of COVID, and obviously the fact that there's been two wars that have started in the last 18 months as well. And the property market is still growing and it's still moving.
Well, that purely what you've just said there is because there are larger influences on the property market here in Australia than some of those things that you've mentioned. Interest rates, wars. We've got stronger influences on real estate here in Australia right now, and that's why we're still seeing the average growth from dwellings in 2023 was 5.5%. So we still grow. Any losses that most places had throughout the year have been replaced. So we're now in positive territory again.
And so let's say, we get to January 2025, right? So it's 12 months time. Where do you see things going?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really broad question because, as we've mentioned, there are thousands of property markets throughout Australia. I think if we're talking, broad stroke Australian property market as an average, we will see a similar year to what we saw last year, in my opinion. I think a lot of this comes down to sentiment. So, I can tell you through our hotspotting business, right? We sell obviously hotspotting reports, which are, investor reports, and, for consumers, that could be mum and dad thinking, I might buy an investment property. Those types of customers through our website are transient. They might come in a couple of times a year to buy a report, but I can tell you every time there's an interest rate, we will not see one of them. They just disappear for 30 days, but the businesses like yourself who understand that we don't listen to the media rhetoric about these things and that there are greater influences, they continue to, buy reports and have memberships and are constantly looking at the right opportunities. So that's a really good segue into, I think that there are huge opportunities in 2024 in the right markets. And I'm talking double-digit growth markets over the next 12 months because of those influences of low supply, increasing population, not building enough new homes, and all of the challenges that new build have had over the last sort of 18 months, which I think we're starting to come out the other side of at the moment. But certainly sentiment around new build has taken a hit. But there's still great opportunities out there if you're willing to trust in a builder, do your due diligence and buy in the right areas. You'll save a hell of a lot of money in tax and stamp duty. So there's big opportunities for people to be buying in the right locations. I have got a bit of a presentation I can take you through today if you'd like to see a bit of a reflection of 2023 and what I've done a bit of a around the grounds type approach with looking at each state. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Got it.
Okay, so what we're looking at for the outlook for 2024, buyer demand has become stronger over the last 12 months. Most cities and regional markets have started the year with considerable momentum. 2024 is shaping up to be a positive year, continuing the momentum we see in these key markets throughout 2023, and steady growth is expected in most cities and regional markets. The housing dynamics are that there simply isn't enough housing to meet the demand for shelter. And this is the thing that people forget. You know, we don't all need shares. We don't all need gold, but we all need a roof over our head. Yeah. So as an asset, you know, there's never been, you know, a safer time to invest in a residential real estate asset in Australia, certainly in my time in real estate, because there isn't enough. Like, somebody's going to want to rent your home.
Yeah.
So that's a really big thing that I think, you know, anybody sitting on the fence and wondering, oh, is it a good time to buy? Yes, it absolutely is. If you can afford the repayments and maintain the mortgage for 10 years, absolutely, it's a great time to buy. Now, the high cost of building has reduced the supply of new accommodation. And while there's increased compliance and taxation caused on many mum and dad investors, they've started to pull out of the market. Here in Victoria, you know, we've got this incompetent state government, which is just making it, you know, completely unpalatable to be an investor in Victoria. Like tax after tax, you know, backflipping on all sorts of things, even, you know, constantly bringing up the idea of rental caps and things like that, which just won't work. But they're more or less telling people, we don't want your money here in Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that there's no real changes on the future that are going to fix those things. And the impact of that is that property's proven to be a resilient and stable asset class in 2023. Values have increased and selling activity remains robust. The lack of supply and low levels of listings have contributed to a steady rise in buyer activity throughout the year. This again comes back to our price predictor index, us monitoring sales volumes. And, you know, Melbourne, ironically, you know, was dire at the start of 2023, but the momentum from the middle of the year, 83% of the suburbs in Melbourne have got rising markets of sales activity. So it's actually the strongest economy in Australia as well. If you look at the Commonwealth, what do they call their report? You know, it's a Commonwealth report. Commonwealth Bank releases a report every year talking about the state of every state, the State of the States report, I think it's called. And, you know, it talks about the fact that Victoria is the, you know, strongest state, you know, from an economic point of view. But we've got a state government that is just making it difficult for investors. If you want to create more housing, you got to make it easier for investors.
Yeah.
Anyway, the cohorts that are really influencing the buyer demand include affordable lifestyle seekers, so people moving into those regional areas. We're seeing downsizers, and we're not seeing downsizers that want to downsize on their lifestyle. They're downsizing from the maintenance. They don't want to mow the lawns and everything, but they're not downsizing on quality. So ironically, in the last sort of 6 to 8 months, we've noticed a trend that not many other economists have cottoned onto, which is that apartment markets throughout the country are actually outperforming housing markets, which has not been seen in probably since the late 70s, early 80s. But, you know, this is a mixture of things, but one of them is the downsizers that are actually going into luxury living. They want to live, they don't want to downsize on lifestyle. They want to downsize on that, you know, larger land blocks and the maintenance that comes with a larger home.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're still seeing large influx of overseas migrants, and we're seeing a lot of renters becoming homeowners as well. When you look at the loans that were entered into from first home owners last year, it again grew by November when they released the last stats. So all really positive, you know, things to say. These influences are going to make property growth pretty much a must. Like, it has to happen. It's just simple economics. So the opportunities and considerations for 2024, there's always been multi-speed markets around Australia, with some rising, some stagnating, and others falling. So cities such as Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, regional Queensland, regional New South Wales are expected to have the strongest growth. Adelaide, regional South Australia, regional WA, regional Vic and Hobart are likely to deliver solid uplift. Rents will continue to rise, and new housing approvals have fallen to their lowest levels in a decade. This can only put upward pressure on rents. So again, we're leveling out on interest rates. There is talk that by October we could start to even see some reductions in that. So as an investor, our yields are going to get stronger. The interesting stats that I pulled out of some of our recent analysis is that median rents. It's actually, I wrote this presentation last week, and then today I saw that it's actually gone from 580 a week to 600. So it's the average rent around Australia is $600 per week, and rents have increased 9.1% for houses and 13.1% for units in between December 2022 and 2023. No one's seen that more than you guys in Western Australia, Corey.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. What sort of average yields are you seeing over there at the moment?
Oh, high fives, early sixes. It's look, obviously the interest rates have put a lot of pressure on, I guess a combination of interest rates, the fact that we've got literally no rentals over here. I mean, we're renting and leasing homes. We had a home open yesterday. We had 19 people through 7 applications.
Yeah, wow.
It's just we can't get enough, and unfortunately, I mean, just from the ABS stats, we had 84,500 people come to WA in terms of population growth. We're building 12,000 homes per year in a maxed out industry. So there's actually, and this is where I was saying, I can see both sides, because socially there are now areas where there's just a sea of tents because people are homeless, people in cars, there's just not enough houses here. And so in effect, this is really ramping up the cost of rent because it's supply and demand.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, there is no instant solutions in sight. The government's not capable of delivering the homes that they're promising.
No.
Okay, moving on to prospects for 2024. As I just said, there's no solutions in sight for the rental shortage crisis. Rents and yields will continue to rise, and will take concerted efforts to boost housing supply and reduce construction costs. There are no viable solutions presented yet, so the pool of rental homes will likely get smaller in 2024. Mortgage rates may come down, which will boost sentiment, but it won't create a boom. Now, predictions versus outcomes of 2023. So in January 2023, we saw solid but not prolific price rises in most markets across Australia. But predictions from economists, as they tend to do, were predicting 15 to 20% price declines. And of course, proven wrong again, like they were in the COVID times, that the average result was an 8.3% increase in house prices and 6.3% for unit, which works out to be 5.5% for dwellings. Economists working for big banks and institutions have a dismal track record when it comes to real estate forecasts. So here's a tip: trust specialist real estate analysts with a track record of accurately predicting market trends, and don't buy into this constant media rhetoric about doom and gloom, because they just keep on getting it wrong. And it bemuses me that they manage to keep their job year after year, Corey.
It's honestly, this is one of the this is where the misinformation comes in, right? Because the amount of times I've had clients come to me and say, hey, this economist has said this or has said this. And not only is it blatantly wrong, but just the overall mechanics of what they're using. Because again, a lot of these guys, when they're looking at the overall economy, they are constantly assuming that what happens to shares, and like you're saying before, we don't need shares to survive.
Yeah.
They're overlaying the exact same mechanics on top of property, but it's not how it works. We've got far longer transaction cycles than shares. Property is a fundamental human need. It's shelter, as we've spoken about. And, these guys, it's almost as if they have no idea what they're talking about. Yet these guys are the most, especially when they're working for the big banks. It's like, these are supposed to be the best economists in the country.
Yeah.
And they're getting it so wrong to the point where people are making decisions based off what these economists are saying and losing so much money. In fact, I had a client, and this was actually during COVID. Have you heard of an economist in the States called Harry Dent?
Yes, I have.
Cool. So this is one of those very prolific, economists that's always, quite polarizing, right?
Yeah.
One of my clients sent me one of his videos. This is when COVID first kicked off, saying that, the housing market's going to crash, the economy's going to crash, we're about to go in recession. And he literally said this, and I'll quote him, paraphrasing, right? But this is what he basically said. And I've been telling all of my listeners for 30 years we're about to have this crash. And when it happens, you're gonna basically wish you'd never had got in the market. So let's just break this down for a second. You've been telling people for 30 years not to enter the market, right? So first of all, you're absolutely wrong because we still haven't had that crash.
Mhm.
Number two, if people have been listening to what you've been saying for 30 years and not getting to the market for 30 years, our property cycle across the country has doubled 4 times in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So,
So, but the other part is he giving any recommendation to buy something else, or we're just saying don't spend anything, put your money in the bank?
basically, like the summary, and when the client sent it to me, I literally went through this video and like minute and second, like was kind of talking to what he was saying. And basically the sum of the email was like, dude, don't ever listen to this person ever again. Like
Yeah, that's it.
he clearly has no freaking idea what he's talking about. And lo and behold, this particular client in question, we actually helped him purchase a property in Brisbane in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why he said it was because he was kind of freaking out. Like, do I hold on to it? He purchased that property for 450 odd. Last bank valuation we've got was about 780.
Well,
So
Brisbane since COVID has increased by 50% already.
yeah,
Yeah.
luckily for the client, he obviously, sort of understood where my perspective and actually looked at the real life data rather than just this guy's opinion.
Yeah.
But again, he's almost doubled his money,
Yeah.
just by understanding and listening to someone who actually has our boots on the ground and understands the mechanics of property, not listening to these economists that are using the same methodology trying to imprint it over property. It's not how it works. It's never
No.
how it works.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
one of my favorite quotes from Terry in particular, I've actually got it printed and it's on my wall here. Local property prices are not dictated by the global economy. It's dictated by the local economy and supply and demand.
Yep.
And that's why when we go through things like the GFC, right, during 07 to 09, the world, from share prices, from bonds and all these different asset classes that they tanked. Perth property prices didn't tank because Perth property prices are dictated by our economy and local supply and demand, not the global economy in the GFC in the US or started in the US. And so again, it's really, and I think this conversation is really important because a lot of our clients and listeners, they don't understand when they see an economist, they see them as this position of authority, being someone who's an expert in this field and expert with money and expert in the economy. And it is mind-boggling how bad they get it.
Yeah.
Because it's not only do they get it wrong, they get it so wrong. It's almost the opposite. I mean, we had
well, I mean, in COVID they were predicting 20% losses, and we grew by 20%, so they were 40% wrong.
Correct. It's almost as if they have no freaking idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, it's important because for so many people who aren't experts in property and investing and economics, that they look at these guys and think that holy shit, they're supposed to know what they're talking about. They just don't. It's insanity.
Well, look, the flip side of this as well is that if there is anybody out there that was thinking, you know what, let's just say for any reason they don't think it's going to be a bump a couple of years in real estate. One thing's for sure, people are going to need to rent your home. We have a shortage. So let's say that your property, you buy it for 600, it drops back. We have an absolute, disaster, and all of a sudden it's now worth 400. Your tenants don't come and tell you, I'm no longer paying $600 a week, I'm paying 400. It doesn't happen. So as long as you can maintain that mortgage, the question you need to ask yourself is, do I believe if I bought real estate today that in 10 years time will be worth more than I paid? And I don't think there'd be too many people in this country that would say no to that. So if you only look to forget about what the next 2 years or 5 years happen to look like, I think they'll be strong. But who am I? If somebody was just worried about that, they could still own real estate, and no matter whether it fell backwards or not, it's an on-paper loss. Yeah. And that there's the confidence in and stats to back up the fact that people need to rent your home.
100%.
They need to live somewhere. It is a necessity.
Yeah, and to take that a step further, oftentimes when I talk to my clients about the mechanics of property, and I think your acronym Imperial is spot on, right? When we're investing, what we're doing is we're putting our money at risk on the basis we're going to get a return. Now, really what that means is we're betting on something, right? Now, obviously, when we're betting on shares, it's economic performance and business growth. When we're betting on different asset classes, there's certain things that we're actually betting on or betting against. Now, right now, when it comes to especially Australian residential property, what we're betting on is the fact that our population will continue to outperform the current construction.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the overseas migration, when you look at how sparsely populated we are, in fact, we're probably one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world. You look at our opportunities in terms of jobs. You look at our culture. You look at the safety. You look at the weather. There's no reason, and it's honestly for me, it's a no-brainer why so many hundreds of thousands of people are coming here every single year. Like, why the hell? Like, we're living freaking paradise. Like, this is like we do not. And I'm ex-Navy, right? So when I went to the Middle East, I've seen a lot of parts of that kind of the world, and we are honestly, I say this to my friends often. It's almost like we're living in fairyland over here as compared to the rest of the world. And when we look at how many people are coming here to get the better jobs, earn way more money, send their kids to way safer schools, we've got way more opportunity. When you think of the weather and just the stuff we've got here, for these people, and really my question is, do you think the population is going to continue outperforming construction? And the simple matter of the fact is, it is quicker, easier, and cheaper to make babies than make houses. That's that's reality.
Yeah, well, that and skilled migration. I mean, it's we obviously need the trades, but secondly, we need more taxpayers with the aging population that we've got. That's just plain economics. It has to happen.
Now, when it comes to solutions to this thing, because I think this is also, I often try and focus on solutions to try and fix these problems. Not to say that I can fix everything, right? I certainly can't. I can, not a lot, to be honest. But it does seem to me like there needs to be some kind of intervention. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse and worse.
Yeah.
And I see most other mature countries around the world. I mean, when we look at places like London, New York, Paris, a lot of older cities, they're cultures where everybody's forced to rent because no one can afford to buy real estate. And the fact of the matter is, they've got these massive populations, they've got X amount of infrastructure. It's a function of supply and demand.
Yeah.
Now, we're also still living in a culture that's still very young, where it's still the norm for people to buy homes. Now, unless we have some kind of intervention, whether it be from governments, whether it be from developers or builders or whatever the case is, banks for that matter, we're going to be very likely heading in the same direction as most other mature cities.
Yeah.
Or countries, rather. In terms of solutions, right? Because I mean, I've, not to say that the government's going to listen to this show and, take advice.
Like to think so.
Well, yeah, we'd freaking hope so. But, what do you think the solutions could be that we can actually have as a palatable solution? Hey, guys, our local councils, guys, this is what we need to think about doing. Do you guys have put any thought into that at all?
Look, there isn't a magic wand for that. I agree that there needs to be, I think one of the most positive things that I've seen in the last couple of years, I'm not sure if you're familiar with PIPA, but I'm a member and we're a major sponsor of PIPA, which is the Property Investment Professionals Association. Now, this has been, the association has been around for, well over 10 years, maybe even 20. But what's happened in the last couple of years, Nicola McDougall, who's the chair, has finally got a seat at the table with a lot of, discussions with the right people in politics now. When they're talking about housing, she's actually getting a seat at the table where they'll actually listen to what property investors are actually saying and what our problems are, because property investors are the ones that can provide a quicker solution. We're the ones providing the housing. The government can't. Now, the problem is, for many years, they've actually, and any time they need a tax grab, they just slam the property investors. And, here in Victoria, it's property investors that have now got to fork out the bill for the COVID debt that we have. Just every time there's a problem, it's hit the property investors. And not just necessarily investors, property owners. Now, that's got to change. In order for us to be able to get any sort of progress on the housing shortage, they need to start incentivizing property investors. Why are we paying higher interest rates when we're actually providing accommodation for people who need it?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. We get slogged with higher taxes, higher insurances, higher everything. Stamp duty, you name it. So there needs to be some forward thinking on that. And I think PIPA having a seat at the table is a really positive step. I don't think things will change overnight, but they had the Queensland rental caps overturned. No, it wasn't rental cap. Sorry, it was the land tax review that we're going to do. They were trying to tax you on every land asset that you have in every state, which is never going to happen because you'd need to be self-reporting. But they were, between PIPA and the REIQ, they were able to have that overturned. So now that they're being heard in the right conversations, I think that's a positive start, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, even from a lending perspective, because with where the interest rates have gone, this is obviously chokeholding the supply of housing. Because especially with the buffers on the back of the Royal Commission in 2017, that the 3% buffers they're putting on, for where interest rates are now versus where they were 2 years ago, half the people right now can actually do something and supply the housing.
Yeah.
But even when I'm speaking to local governments, it's almost as if they're completely unaware of the issues that this is going to create. And again, what we're talking about right now are the leading indicators. The leading indicators is the fact that property prices just go out of control.
Yeah.
And then we've got all these other issues called people can't afford it, and it just socially it just doesn't actually do us favors in the long run. And this is kind of where I think having these conversations are important, because we obviously know what we're talking about. Right. And it's quite clear that when the government are getting advice from economists, and then their policy turns around and tries to slug property investors because all these property investors are so wealthy, their heads are in the clouds. I mean, your average property investor is earning less than $100,000 a year.
I know, it's one investment property.
Right. So the overwhelming majority of property investors are mum and dad investors. They're not these big wealthy people who are, trying to monopolize the market in some way.
Yeah.
But again, Nicola's awesome, and I've been a member of PIPA for a little while now. Well, we have, and I think what they're doing is awesome. It's the same with the Property Investment Council of Australia too.
Yep.
Because having these players, and unfortunately, I mean, I wish property investment became regulated, because then straight away it would eliminate all the the bad players out of the industry. But then what it would do, it would actually kind of give us a little bit more legitimacy when it comes to these conversations.
Yeah.
And we can actually have proper solutions and actually provide these solutions in a formal setting, versus trying our best to just hit and hope, with one person, getting a seat at the table, So, I think it's just really, if we can just keep doing the right thing and trying to get this message through, the more of us that are saying it, hopefully it brings more weight to it, and they can start helping us and trying to incentivize investment, not trying to disincentivize like what, I mean, Queensland did. I mean, Victoria's probably doing the worst job under Dan Andrews, but it's you're 100% correct. We need to be incentivizing supply of housing.
Yeah.
And it's a pendulum. I mean, there's going to be certain times where we don't want to, because we've got too many houses, right? And
that's right.
It's having a nice balance, not just letting the pendulum just swing one extreme to the other, where we've got, property prices out of control, but then all of a sudden we've got way too many houses and house prices plummet, and it's having a really nice, delicate balance between them. And that's where everybody wins.
Yeah.
The investors win.
It's a tough one, because, post-COVID is a great example. Like, in order to try to stimulate the economy, they put out grants for first home buyers, and it all was surrounding new build, and that comes with a lot of issues off the back of that as well. So sometimes when they're trying to do the right thing, they're actually making matters worse.
Yeah.
So this is where they need to consult, the private sector and industry bodies like a PIPA and PICA to actually get some understanding of what the repercussions could look like.
Yeah. No, 100%, man. And I think the more we have these conversations, the better, really, because it's just having our feet on the ground and actually physically seeing it. Because I mean, like, I've seen, the lines out front of land estates right now with people fighting over blocks of land because there's not enough land. Yeah. Then on the other side of the spectrum, there's a couple of little spots in Perth where these parks are just full of tents because no one can basically live in it. And it's like, guys, we have to kind of meet in the middle here. And this government intervention of constantly trying to provide band-aid solutions, just creating more problems down the track 6 to 12 months later, like, that's not actually solving the friggin' problem here. It's making shit worse. Yeah, so I totally get it. Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
So Tim, probably one of the final things I think would be worth talking to, and this is in line with, I guess, kind of the direction that we're sort of heading socially, right? I mean, one of the big hot button topics right now is climate and obviously the impacts of climate, right?
Sure.
And I guess again, there's different perspectives on this. Some people think that, we're destroying the planet, right? And when I completely understand that. There's other people that think it's kind of the opposite. But in my perspective, I mean, number one, I think that we pollute way too much, and I think we should probably stop polluting. But I also
Yeah.
think that in terms of housing, having a focus on sustainability, I think as much as it's a short-term pain, I think there's also a long-term gain that we can really take from actually thinking about sustainability, especially when it comes to housing.
Yeah.
And again, I don't expect you to have an answer on this, right? But it's just, I think it's an important conversation to have. When we think about, let's just say, 10 years time, 20 years time, one of the things I'm seeing, especially in Perth and in some of the metro cities, is, state governments really want to densify, the
Yeah.
cities.
Build up instead of out.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and that's because obviously we can't continue sprawling forever. I mean, obviously we've got heaps of land in Perth and, Brisbane or WA and Queensland. There's heaps of land. But, sustainability in terms of, obviously the cost of infrastructure, the cost of, continuously increasing train lines and freeways and things like that, obviously doesn't necessarily work from an environmental aspect.
Yeah.
But what do you think that people can be doing in the short term? Let's just say in the next 3 to 5 years, even just from their own homes, in terms of tips or tricks or ways to actually make, whether it's energy consumption or just the actual homes more sustainable, so that we're not burdening future generations.
Yeah, look, it's a
Hard
it's a
one.
tough one. It's probably not one that I'm qualified for, to be honest. But look, obviously, I think being mindful right from the start, to be aware of these things, and whether that be in the way of, using sensor lights, using solar, recycling better, all of these little things add up to a greater impact. So I think people just being aware of that is a really important thing to begin with. But what I would touch on the urban sprawl and building up instead of out, we are noticing trends now where, people are opting for apartment living as a choice now, not just because of affordability, but a lifestyle choice. I live in a house now, but for many years, I lived in apartment living and loved it because it had great amenity, close to amenities like work and, lifestyle of being in the city, all those types of things. So people are opting to live like that now, and I think that's a good thing. That it's meaning that we're not having to spend on that infrastructure constantly going further and further away. Yes, we have a lot of land, but it's an expensive exercise to keep on going out, and we're using a lot more fossil fuels in order to get there, and all these different things. So building up, I think, is actually a positive thing for most capital cities, because we're using a lot of, how do I put this, a lot of things that are already existing, like, going double story, building into somebody's backyard. We don't have to go that far, but, we're starting to make in some jurisdictions some intelligent moves as to, allowing granny flats and all those types of things, which are, sustainable kit homes and things like that, which are going to be quicker solutions than just extending our urban boundaries.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's one of those things where I'm constantly seeing this battle between, state governments and local governments, where they want to densify, and
Yeah.
then local governments are just basically saying, well, not in our area, please. And then
Yeah.
there's this kind of tug of war, and really nothing ends up happening, and
Yeah.
unfortunately,
And look, that's very true of new build homes now as well. They're bringing out, I think next month, there's now some new restrictions around the stage 7, 7-star energy ratings and things.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to increase the cost of homes. So I think, given that we're already struggling to build enough homes, a new build home, like 50% of the expense of a new build home really does go to taxes, whether it be stamp duty, whether it be, GST, all these different things, right? So we've got to get smarter on that. If we're going to be, making it more expensive to build these homes, to make them energy efficient, we also need to be a little bit more lenient on, the taxes that are involved as well, because otherwise it's just, we're not going to be able to build them. So it can't be all take. We've got to have a bit of give as well. And I don't know who's responsible for that, but something's got to give.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, unfortunately, until it does, it's just the market effects are what's going to take.
It's got a flow-on effect.
100%. But no, that's yeah, I get it too, because it's hard to, it is really hard to predict, the direction we're going. But I also, this is something I'll also try and bring on the forefront with clients too, because we have to be mindful of the direction we're going.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to just, and I've seen this time and time again, people just buying properties for the sake of it, not really having an understanding of what does this look like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But I'm just, look, man, I'm glad that we've got guys like you out there where you're doing the right work. You're providing us really, really good solutions to have, far better areas and far better research and far better products and services for our clients. And
Yeah.
man, love what you're doing. Keep it up.
No, I appreciate that. One last thing I was just going to touch on for the sustainable things. There's some really good initiatives that I've seen here in Victoria, and it may happen elsewhere as well. But there's some. Don't quote me on this. This is I'm going back in my memory to when I first started seeing these businesses. But something like 80% of waste that ends up in wastelands throughout Victoria comes off construction sites, and a lot of the stuff that is that comes off those construction sites is actually recyclable. And they say that every year we could fill the MCG with the waste that comes off every new build construction site, right? Now, there are companies out there that are going around and they're putting in recyclable bins, and they're recycling 80% of that waste. Now, that's something that, if the government was serious about sustainability, enforce these types of things, and, don't make the consumer pay for it. Incentivize and, reward these businesses that are actually looking at this type of thing as a sustainable outcome, because that's where we make big impact.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a freaking awesome idea.
Yeah.
But it's, unfortunately, again, it comes to, because I mean, having the average person being able to start a business or provide a solution like that, there needs to be some kind of money involved. Otherwise, it's not feasible.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I completely understand. And it's almost as if, and not to try and tell the government how to do their jobs, right? But if we
Probably should.
if we can just incentivize the direction we want to go,
Yeah.
most of these solutions will be solved.
Yeah.
But instead of just trying to tax and then dictate, incentivize and let the market forces just do what the market forces always do, which is move in that direction. I'm hoping that we have a better future, and I'm sure you do too.
Absolutely. Cheers to that.
That's it, man. But no, look, dude, I really, really appreciate your time, Sam. And I think, I think this will give our clients a lot of really good value and insights into the direction. And I think, the big thing is just confidence that we are moving in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And that's
keen to do it again sometime. I hope, to any listeners out there, obviously they should be relying on advice. I spent a lot of time living in the US and working in real estate in the US. And what a lot of people don't understand, because buyers advocacy is seen as a new thing here in Australia over the last decade. In America, and in other countries around the world, there is an agent on both sides of the transaction, on every transaction, one to support the vendor and one to support the purchaser. And if you think about it, real estate, as I mentioned before, is a really expensive exercise if you get it wrong. So why isn't the purchaser, better supported by a professional in most transactions? And if you think about the logic in that, it makes complete sense, doesn't it? And every state in Australia has different laws when it comes to real estate. So by tapping into a good buyer's agent, a licensed buyer's agent who knows those laws, not only should you get a better outcome, but hopefully you're going to make sure that you're not going to be getting the wrong property for your portfolio, because what's right for one person's wrong for the next. It really does come down to what you said before, understanding what your goals are and buying the right vehicle for those goals.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, when property does become regulated, property investment advice, I think that, the buyer's agency model, which is part of what we do here, I think it will become a lot more legitimate than what it is now. Because again, right now, because of the fees and commissions and stuff like that generally happens in the background, because there is no regulation, it kind of creates this level of skepticism and kind of fear that someone's kind of pulling the wool over your eyes. And I completely understand from a buyer's perspective why they would think that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, I'll keep pushing Nicola to keep pushing this to get regulated, because I think that'll solve a lot of problems.
There's a way that customers, consumers can self-regulate a little bit as well, is that when you're speaking to, somebody who's giving you any type of, advice, and I use that term loosely, but giving you any recommendations in regards to, investing in real estate, there's two questions you're going to ask. One, are you licensed? And two, how much property do you actually own yourself? Are you actually practicing what you preach? Because there's a lot of buyers agents out there, never own real estate, have no intention of buying real estate, but yet they're giving people advice on where they should invest their money. And, that's not wrong. They're not right. So you should be going and asking those two questions, and they'll help self-regulate pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, I think it's very smart. It's almost like having a mechanic whose car's a dump.
Yeah, exactly right. They do say plumbers have usually got leaking taps at home as well, but that's just their time poor.
Yeah, no, I hear, man. I hear, but you're right, man. It is important, and for a lot of people, properties, it's a massive transaction.
Yeah,
right? And it's in getting it wrong. You're 100% right. It's a very, very expensive exercise if you don't get it right.
yeah, that's right.
So I get it, man. But no, dude, thanks very much for doing this. So I really, really
No worries.
appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Pleasure to be here. And as I said, love to do it again sometime.
Sounds good, man.
Take it. Thanks, Corey. Cheers.